I save it for my hexagon quilts. If it's under that, I throw it in this bag, and when the bag is full, I make quilts from them. I've made 4 already just from this bag, and I've got half the bag left. This year for Christmas, I decided I'm going to make all the guys in my family a strip quilt.
Make them what?
A strip quilt of strings. And this one was for Cornerstone for
Orphanage.
the orphanage in Honduras.
Pretty.
These are 5-inch squares, and it's supposed to be for a young boy. And so that was for that. And so and most of the time this is made out of paper. People use like a newspaper, or they use a phone book, or Carol Doak, I think is her name. She sells the papers in the store. Wow, I'm not gonna spend any money on that. So I picked, and then there's this. There's this product also. It's like a interfacing weave, and it already comes in like a 10-inch square. Can you pass it around? Some people use that, and they leave that in. Well, I take the fabric that's extremely thin that people throw out on the table that you can't really use for quilts or really anything else anymore. So I will cut them down. This is an 8-inch square. These are 5s. I've made, like this is a 10, and I have 12 over there, and I have 6s. It's whatever is left. These are all 8s. They're bundled in a set of 20. I use the back of these to quilt on, and I go on a diagonal. So I'll lay it down, so the next one to it, and keep going. So these are 8s, and you can see I leave the fabric on. These are just bundled, ready to go. And these are 10s, and they're made on that interfacing thing. Some people will start out and make half of it like this, and then they put the big the square on the diagonal like that, and it makes a totally different pattern. And so I use that as a way of using up my scraps because they're so expensive. Last month I shared this one. My grandsons are both 9, they're twins. And so I have to make them a little different, but usually the same. So you can see that I have used the fabrics in place of paper that I would not, if I used paper, I would have to pick it out. And I don't use the paper, I use these little thin little squares of the leftover stuff, and I leave it in, and I do use batting. Some people don't. It's just faster and easier. And so for this grandson, I have used an 8-inch square. Every diagonal is 2 inches. This is the only fabric I bought was the UGA. And I cut it at 2 inches. And I also put one at the end of each side so it makes that contrasting little square. Can you see the square in the center? Okay, so this one is for the other twin, and it does not have these little, it just has the center. It doesn't have the little corner on each end. That way it's the same but a little different. There's no fighting, or I hope. But for the boys, I did have to go through my scraps and separate the girl stuff because they don't want pink in their quilt. They're 9. So I'm going to show you how I do it. Oh, these are the rest of his squares. They're already made, ready to be sewn. There's that one. This is how these you can pass them out. This is how I usually keep the current strips that I'm working on in one of these and some squares. And so everybody gets some of these.
Yeah, she made those for us.
Everybody can take these. I'm going to pass those out, and I'll show you how I do it. I take my square, and I find strip that'll fit, and I just lay it down. Nothing to it, no pins, no nothing. Then I take the next strip and I just lay it down, and I sew it on. Yes, it's all different widths, and sometimes they're not even trimmed. They're just whatever I choose. And save those little triangle pieces that you usually throw away, because they make great little end pieces here for your triangles. Or bigger squares like this.
So hold that up, what you just sewed up.
And I just finger pressed it. Some people don't like to finger press, so you can iron it, but it's really not necessary. I just finger press and keep going, and I do both sides. And it's usually really quick. And there's really, don't fuss with it. It's whatever comes out that fits, slap it down. It takes a lot of people out of their comfort zone to have to do that. But it's best if it doesn't match. Unless it's the exact same fabric, then. Okay, so here is the little corner. Now, those little triangles will fit on there. Of course, do I see a triangle on here? Here's one, but it's blue. Oh well, it's blue. All right, so one whole side is done. Wow. And then you just continue on this side, but if you notice, see how the backing? So when the time comes for me to trim, sometimes this very thin fabric will shrink up a bit with all the sewing. So I will iron it, and I don't go off, I don't cut on this because I can't trust the size anymore. So I don't have a ruler, but I would just lay it down and use the ruler lines. And I just use that, and it's perfect. Square it up. And that's how I've made this one, the one for Honduras, my grandsons. I made this one, oh, here's my ruler. I made this yellow one here for my daughter a couple of years ago for Christmas. So anyway, I just use the lines on the ruler. And there you go. And there's the back of it. And then when I put the squares together, it looks like this. I do take more than 1/4 inch because it's kind of bulky. So these seams are a little bigger so that I can open them and lay them flat. It's just too bulky to press to one side, especially when you're quilting them. You'll break a needle. And so I made this one for my daughter for Christmas a couple of years ago.
So what are you gonna do with the edge of this? Are you gonna turn it under or back it?
I'll put batting and a backing. It'll be a quilt. So this one is a little different because I've used sashing. And the black just kind of makes all the scraps pop.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that pretty?
That'd be a good one.
Yeah.
Anyway, these are these blocks. 12 tens, I think. And this I made for my daughter. No, I sent this out to be quilted. So.
Brenda's getting a picture of that.
The blackers. And you don't have to work on it, but just like whenever you get the itch to do something quick. And then I just keep all my stacks until I get enough.
That looks like it's individual pieces.
Oh, no.
So you could piece a strip.
You could piece a strip, it's not, but what, you could. This one here looks like it was.
Oh, but that's the one.
You could do that if you wanted to, but I use up so much, it's so expensive, I use every bit of it.
All right, y'all, she started. Okay.
But we have a few samples to show you and a how-to. Didn't I say last time, because this was May, that I would bring you some grid grip for the back of your rulers? This is what I have, so we can cut it up into strips and you can put some on your rulers.
Cool.
Okay, first of all, what we're doing, there's a big controversy, which is correct.
Selvage.
Both are correct. EGE or EDGE is correct. Since the 16th century, this has been used to say it is the self-edge of the fabric. When you weave on a loom and your weft thread goes this way and it ends on the bottom, it comes back over the top and starts weaving again the opposite direction. Over and weaves back and forth. That way the edge is finished. It doesn't require any hem. So it is self-edged. What it is not is this. This belongs here because we are making something, repurposing, DIYs, whatever, upcycling, that's what we're doing. You're using our salvage material, our selvages, to make something new and beautiful.
Yeah.
Now that I got that straight, get that out of my way. It's easier to do this piecing on paper. How many of you have seen the thrifty nickel? Don't throw it away. Grab one when you're in the restaurant and take it home and say that you can cut it out or make squares this big. I was in Hogansville the other day and I picked up one of their little historical things. That's a lot of paper. I think if you're making 5-inch squares, you can get 4 out of that. How many of you groan every time you see this in the mailbox? Okay? All of that'll work too. When I was traveling recently, I stopped at the welcome station and picked up one of each kind, which is what I have used here. This is the back page of. Okay? Okay. I started these to show you 2 different methods. Excuse me. Okay. This, I used the triangle, and evidently, well, there's the bottom. Evidently, I went off the edge and did not quite catch it. That's okay. Before I put this one on, I can fix that. Okay. This one is done. Let me get a good selvage over here. With seaming it and flipping it, just as Mary was doing. You put the selvage on upside down and flip it over when you've sewn it. And because it is a self-edged fabric, you can sew like 2 threads in. It doesn't have to be a big seam. You just have to be sure that you catch it on the back side, which I obviously didn't do here. Okay, the other way, I've got my triangle here. I just lay it on there. Make sure it overlaps this side overlaps the square, which you can see that I didn't do here. So I'm gonna show you how to fix that. Looking for the other pieces right there. I just sewed another piece onto it till it was long enough to finish. Who's gonna know? Who cares? This little spot had a peekaboo. Sew it again. Don't take anything out. Just sew it again. It's okay.
So on that side, you're stitching just straight on top. You're not doing any flipping.
Do what?
You're just sewing them straight on top of
On
each other,
top, on
not
top.
doing any
All
flipping.
you have to do is make sure that you have a little bit left, preferably at least 1/4 of an inch. So you kind of have to, excuse me, guesstimate, but you can make it straight with the line on the previous one, so that you know you're straight and you know you've covered everything. You're not seeing any raw edges.
Do you ever worry about the paper, that it's gonna rub off the color or anything, or you not?
No, because I'm gonna take it off as soon as I get done. Okay. The suggestion is with your fabrics, if you can, leave a little bit of fabric of color on your selvage so that you will have a variation here. And you will see something besides just white and words and dots. When you get your fabric and you get your pattern and you have it selvage to selvage, look at what your pattern calls for, how many strips you cut, how many you can get out of that one strip on all your different sizes before you do this. That way you can, all you need is 40 inches, we'll cut 40 and a half. There you go. Press it. Now the selvage is always a little bit tighter, so you have to kind of press it real good so that it doesn't curl. Mom told me when she made me a skirt that she forgot to take the selvage off. I kept wondering why the seam kept puckering, and the hem was shorter on the side where the seam was. Now I know. This is perfect. It'll work too. And you can work from this. It's easier with this, with the selvages, to work from one edge to the other, rather than from the center and outward, as Mary did. Let me show you a couple of generous ones. Ooh, that's gonna be good. Ooh, that's gonna be even better. I like that one. This
Okay, stupid question,
was a sew and flip, just the same as the other.
stupid question. Why do you start at the corner and not, you said it, with the selvages, that works better, why?
Because if I
Because there's
started
no
at the
give?
center, I would have to do this, and then I wouldn't have a selvage in the middle. If I start this way here, I can sew the orange one,
Gotcha, okay.
but I can't sew this one, or I'll have to stick something underneath it.
Yep,
So it's easier to go from corner to corner. And it doesn't have to be corner to corner, it can be different. You can put quarter this and go a little bit over one edge, fill in that quarter, flip it around, fill in that corner, and you have a crosshatch. Okay? You can do it this way and make a log cabin. You can do the braid thing. This one I made for the shop years ago. We opened in what, 14? We moved to the new store in 16. So it's that old, 16. Oh, 06, excuse me. But it's just edge to edge. And you can see where it is. This has been washed. So the edge of the selvage just barely ripples. and you can pass that around and see. Lou helped me out. Oh, that's in there. She did the selvages in a very autumn color. Put a top on it. Folded it down, and it's lovely. She did not line it because it's on fabric instead of on paper. This is what I want to do. Isn't that cute?
Yes.
It doesn't have to be on the diagonal. Oh, Mary, where did your 12-inch ones go? Mud rug, this is half of that crosshatch. You just want to overlap your center enough that you can catch it with your first thingamajiggy. Yeah. Who doesn't always need another pin cushion? No, I want one that's been done. I don't care what size it is, 10, 8. And you know where the back came from? Guess. It feels good. It's like leatherette from the upholstery and decorative fabric sections at those places, like Hobby Lobby and Joann's. Just take a sample. Make you a pincushion. That's not what it is. That's to hold, this is not a selvage thing. This is to hold your foot pedal steady so that it doesn't slide away from you every time you put your foot on it. That's just an extra bonus.
It was from our retreat, I'll make it, we take it.
This could be a wine bottle holder. It could be a 2-liter holder. That's just as valuable. It could be, put your hairbrush and curling iron in it. If you did that, I'd put some, thermal stuff in it. But isn't that cute? That's just neat. Okay. For this one, you can do it like this. You can put your zipper on both sides, and when you have it, you can have your zipper at the top like Lou has, or you can put the zipper on it and then bring it down a little bit so that you have your zipper at the edge, on the complete front side. Nothing to it. Super easy. You haven't wasted anything. And that ugly, ugly fabric or that super thin fabric has a purpose now. Bonnie Hunter says if it's still ugly, cut it some more. If it's still ugly, you still haven't cut it small enough. But we don't want to cut it small, we want to cut it big enough to use, where nobody will see it. Okay? I'm not gonna sew any, but I did want you to see this. One other thing about the fuzzies. Do you ever have a case of the fuzzies? Like this one that has the fuzzy edge? It's still usable, just don't sew into the fuzzies. Sew on the solid part of the fabric, because the fuzzies will come right out. This one, when they do the fuzzies like this, they cut it off the loom, and this is the finished edge.
I think that looks like fringe when you do it.
Uh-huh.
I think it looks like fringe.
If I hadn't mailed it to my sister, I would have shown you something really cute. I made me one of these so that I could carry my phone when I don't have a hip pocket to put it in, or don't want my hip pocket standing out. And I put a lid on it with Velcro. But I took the Velcro off because I had it on, sitting in my chair, and it was rubbing my elbow. So I did not take the lid off, the flap, because I'm debating putting a buttonhole and button or a snap on it. But hers, I used a fringed all the same color and made her phone case a little bit bigger. And it looked like a flapper skirt. I just wanted to Charleston away. Okay. This book has a lot of these suggestions. It has a lot of stuff. They're cute as can be. It's very well illustrated. Brenda's a lucky one today, and she gets all of this. Man, you are gonna be busy for a long time.
I guess she'll make us all gifts, right?
I'll tell you what, I'll get you started. Okay. Where did it go? Here. I might have to keep this one though, it's got a crossword puzzle and I love crossword puzzles. Who does crossword puzzles? I got a book for you next time, remind me. I bought a book at Ollie's, big, thick book. And then I went to buy another one, I bought the same one. So I wasn't gonna take it back, I just decided I would find it a new home. Okay, that's all I have to say about stuff.
Anybody have any questions?
I'm gonna leave you.
All right, how many of y'all know what a kitchen sink quilt is? How many of you know what a kitchen sink quilt is? You ever heard the expression? I never had either, but it came up at our board meeting, and I'm like, why would I want a quilt by my kitchen sink? I'm not gonna make a quilt to put dishes on, you know? And anyhow, what it is, it's a quilt that has everything in it but the kitchen sink. Okay, so that's where the term came from. So I've given you each, for each table, I didn't want to waste the paper, but I've given one at each table so y'all can kind of have an idea of what a kitchen sink quilt looks like. This is one that Pat Sloan did, and she called it her grandma's kitchen quilt. But there's all kinds of patterns and things out there on the internet if you go look. And it's basically just pretty much anything you want to do with your scraps or your orphan blocks. That's why I asked y'all to bring orphan blocks. You might want to swap those around at your tables as well. But you'll see on here, if you look closely, you'll see that some of these blocks were not the same size. And so they came in then and maybe put a row of half square triangles or a row of just 2.5 inch squares. So you'll be able to see how they played around with it to make it all fit and look like a really pretty quilt. So the big thing I think you need to do is make sure that you begin by gathering up all the, separating your things out, having orphan blocks, your strips like 2.5 inch, 1.5 inch. You can make 9 patches out of 2.5 inch squares, half square triangles. Just start gathering those things up. Piano things, that are sized to make piano keys. But begin by sorting your scraps, and I think they've been just saying a lot of things. Just throw them in a bag, separated by gender is what I've heard so far, or whether it's selvage or not. I said that right, selvage. But if you also, when you're thinking about actually putting it together as a quilt, some of you are more particular about what you want in your quilts or not. Especially some people I know. I'm looking dead at her. But so you might want to separate your scraps by colorways. Like the colors that tend to go together, like the pastels or the primary colors. And then separate by sizes and shapes, of course, like strips or squares. And the common sizes are like the 1.5 inch strips, 2.5 inch strips, or the 2.5 inch squares or the 5 inch squares. Those are just good common things to help you get started. Then you just kind of need to think about maybe 2 or 3 blocks that you really like the block pattern, and that they would use some of those sizes, the scraps that you have. So, you know, like in here, you could see maybe it could be a square, or it could be a churn dash, whatever your favorite block is. Start looking and saying, okay, well, I need to have 5-inch squares, and then you can go back and make your half square triangles like you need out of them or whatever. So just keep that in mind as you're sorting your things out. When you get enough set aside, and what you can do with those, by the way, is you can start using those as your leaders and your enders, so that you're not having to just sit and sew a quilt or sew a block. You're just kind of doing it as you're working on your other quilts. You know, you've got your little stack of 5-inch squares over there. As you start to end a seam that you're sewing on, just pick up a couple of them, sew, and get your half square triangles. You know, so you're working on 2 things all at once that way. Anyhow, when you get enough of them together to make one of your blocks, go ahead and make a block. And like she said, you know, Mary said she just sets her blocks aside, and then when she has enough to make a quilt, she puts them together. So that's just one way. I'm trying to look at my notes, make sure I didn't leave anything out. So then you're gonna take your blocks, and your blocks may wind up being in different sizes. You know, you may have 8-inch blocks, you may have 12-inch blocks, you may have an orphan block that's, you know, a 10-inch block. Just wherever you've gone, maybe taken a class, or you started a quilt and you know, I'm not ever gonna finish that quilt. I've got these 5 blocks where I started it, but you know, you're not ever gonna use them for anything else. So you're gonna have to then start thinking about what can you add or take away from that. Like when you put it up on your design board, you know, I've got a 10-inch block and then I got an 8-inch block. Well, I need to put, you know, borders around that one so they're both 10-inch, things like that. And then you can make those borders out of flying geese, or little small blocks, or just strips, whatever you want to do to fill in the gaps. And just get creative with it. I tried to do that last night. Actually, it was around 1:30 in the morning. So I was in my closet pulling all these things out, but I wanted to show you an idea. I hope this will work. Let me just leave that up there.
Just take mine down, it's okay.
Okay?
Yep,
All
I
right,
forgot
well,
it.
let's see, I may not be, might need some help getting these things to stick, though. May not be straight, but found a quilt I'd started years ago. One of those, you know, block of the month things at some shop. And then I went and took some lessons on how to use my sewing machine, so, you know.
Stay.
And then use another one of these.
I remember that year.
Yeah. Yeah. And then something like this.
Those corners, like a drunkard's path, separate each thing a lot
Mhm.
where you don't need borders in it.
So I couldn't hear.
When you do those ones with the corners that look like a drunkard's path,
Oh, yeah.
it helps separate where you don't need strips in between to separate.
Right, if I'd made enough of them, but, you know. Like I said, that was a quilt that was started, and, I didn't do very much on it. Actually, those were a class where I was learning to do different things on my embroidery machine. And so, just pulling things out and slapping them up there. I mean,
So there's 12-inch blocks?
12 and a half, I think.
Yeah.
I think so. It just happened to be, but if they'd been smaller, I could have put a border around it. Like this. Now see, then I had another quilt I had started, so. So then I could come
Just like
and
she handed them up there.
do a border around the whole thing.
You gotta get this. I have to find that one.
These were some crazy blocks that I had made for something. I know I won't keep it for anything else, so. And
I could put that green strip down here too. Probably would. But just kind of gives you an idea of what you can do. You know, if you have borders here, maybe up here, just take all these little ones that you had and run them all the way around. Whatever you have, being creative with it. And so I have everything there except the kitchen sink, and you know, now I could do a block here, and it could actually have the kitchen sink in it. So, and I have a challenge for all of you. I have a kitchen sink block for each one of a piece of fabric for each one of you. So now I'm challenging you to go make a kitchen sink quilt. Pull your orphan blocks out, switch some orphan blocks with people, switch scraps, make yourself a kitchen sink quilt, and you can have the kitchen sink in yours.
Sweet.